Dzień dobry.
Good afternoon. I'm Aleksandra Sobczak, and I'm Deputy Editor-in-Chief of Gazeta Wyborcza. And on this panel, I have Agata Tomaszewska, live on Wheelz, Piotr Kowalski, Municipal Welfare Center in Łódź, Weronika Kuna from the Microsoft, and Jakub Wygnański from the STOCZNIA. Before I start asking questions, I would like to share my personal history, because for a couple of years I suffered from a hearing impairment, to a deep degree of hearing impairment. That allowed me to learn a lot, but I also felt exclusion, humiliation, that that I'm very sensitive for this group with this very impairment. But also other people with other disabilities, I'm not that much sensitive. I may ignore them unwillingly. That is why I believe this is an essential panel, because we can talk what we really need. If you do not experience something, you have to learn it. You need to live it, process it. I'm very happy you are with us today and you wish to share your knowledge. My first question is, do you have personal experience, moments which changed your perception, something that taught you accessibility? Agata, will you? Those who know Lives on Wheel know my answer. Meeting Wojciech Sawicki, my fiancé, in 2018 was a moment that changed my perception of the world, I would say. Because Wojciech suffers from Duchenne syndrome. He is an adult, one of very few who live until that age. He has been through many crises, and I met him when he was healthy and stable, but he was anonymous. Then our story began with coming out to the world more and more. It's as if we went through that long way together. I was Agata, it may be difficult for Agata, but I want to encourage everybody who is here now and online to follow the Life on Wheels profile and to learn it in a friendly and full manner. That profile is the place, and the discussions there will allow you full, deep insight of people with different needs. Piotr, what about you? I'm now experiencing inaccessibility. I have a lot of deaf friends. I would love them to watch our meeting and understand it, but they can't. There is no sign language interpretation. I have those friends because I've worked for the Polish Association of the Deaf, and a cooperative that deals with accessibility. But even now, we are talking about something that should be obvious, that we care for the accessibility, and it isn't here. So the way we have to go is long, long. Weronika? Bad when the corporate person says the corporation gave me a lot, but for me the biggest revolution about accessibility after I started working for Microsoft a year ago, in corpos you need to go through various trainings, including values of the company, and one of the values in Microsoft is accessibility. It's not just digital accessibility, but of accessibility for employees, the perception what accessibility is. That was my small revolution, still ongoing. And during one of those trainings, I read a sentence by my CEO: if Microsoft does something wrong with our software design, people will lose jobs. I thought that would be something, but I started thinking about that. In Poland, if Microsoft does something wrong with the software, people with disabilities will lose jobs. What jobs? In Poland, people with disabilities have no jobs. We have not reached that stage as society. It's not the moment in time. We are not there yet. And that was the moment when I understood that we, as the society, regardless of our scientific degree, be it a professor, a CEO, we haven't had that revolution about thinking about the society as inclusive. We are a very divided nation. I'm not talking about politics. Us here in this room, we are before the revolution on thinking about accessibility. We are starting to perceive it, and there is a lot to do ahead of us. I agreed to be here, though I wanted to say I know nothing about it, but I know people who are experts, because in an AGO I work for, those are in the avant-garde of the organizers' naming. I could talk about it for hours, but I believe that in that discussion there is the assumption of accessibility for the disabled to something. We should agree accessibility of whom to whom, common, is it always beneficial? So I would be rather provocative, but yes, I could tell a lot of stories about people whose job is to name things, and from that perspective they care for it. What you said, I wanted to be the second round of our meeting, because I believe that in the field, the thinking has changed. For many years, we spoke mainly of accessibility in terms of architecture, and that was mainly for people on wheelchairs or with visible disability. But that is expanding. So, accessibility for whom and for what? It's important to answer that question. Could you share your thoughts? What and for whom should be accessible? Could I thought? In my opinion, we should remember the topic of the panel. Accessibility is the fundamental right for people, and it is a guarantee of using other rights. We had 6th of September. It was important a couple of years ago. Poland then ratified the Convention on People with Disabilities, but 6th of September this year is equally important. Since that very date, every person with disability in Poland may complain against the lack of accessibility to any public institution. And finally, we have a tool that will give opportunity to request accessibility, to press for arranging accessibility, and possible punishment for its lack, or perhaps not punishment, but forcing its introduction. So you can say, good, a lot has been achieved, but we have another step to go, as it should happen with the public institutions. So the next step should go to private institutions wherever possible. It would be a great challenge for us. We have great corporations. On the other hand, we have small companies, and we should expect both of them to do so, because sometimes for a person it is far more important to get access to his small businessman services of whom to use rather than the corpo. Well, I want to think broadly about accessibility. One of the topics of the Freedom Games is inclusion of the elderly, how they exist in the society. I believe that accessibility is for everyone. We are a society. We do not have an enclave of people with disabilities. Everybody here will suffer from disability to some extent in their life. You've mentioned your experience. Mothers with children in pushchairs also feel the same. Everybody is losing sight or has problems with sight, with age. So to some extent, everybody will be disabled. As long as we do not understand that accessibility is a general matter, and it should be, as long as we expect that the fight should be on the part of NGOs and people of NGOs, and if we don't see that as a social solidarity rather than strange ideas, but the interest of all of us, then we will have problems to understand it. It's not an exclusive group to fight for themselves. We are speaking about our inclusive society. Yes, I think paradoxically, or I want to bring it to a problem. We are talking about social contract, we talk about freedom. How are we going to cope with the accessibility as fundamental, always ready and ready for everybody? I know that many institutions do not fulfill architectonic accessibility, which is the smallest problem. It's a big one, but still the smallest. If we want to look at the needs, we have times ahead when we will ask about access to air and water, access to transport, to health services, to attention. We do different things. At Stocznia, we test a caring robot, but we are not endangered with that. But we shouldn't avoid what is important, that we will build technologies. That matters indeed. But there are bigger problems than that. We will face, in that meaning, the category of social contract is important. You can't imagine the world where each category is accessible to everybody, perhaps to the inhabitant of the city, a person. There are difficult choices how to match the two choices when there is one more ramp for the people on the wheelchair, or additional classes for children in villages, or hospice care. It's all the same. These are difficult choices. I have no solutions, but I feel this is a topic you cannot analyze, and the entitlement category is important. There are entitlements and obligations in the world. It is not a coin without the other side. Even if we look accessibility to technology, I, as the father of three, the category common access to internet, is it the right or a threat? There are many situations where the vectors are not obvious. And I believe this is something we need to face. Some elements, perhaps not what we speak about here, but access to social media is like access to machine guns. I think that's a topic for another panel. It's quite interesting, philosophic, but we have so many problems to solve on our way before accessibility becomes a threat. Well, it would be good it becomes a threat. It would be okay. Then people with different disabilities could understand the evil of the social media, because it depends on each of us. Each offensive artwork you insert without an alternative text excludes the option to be curious at it by a part of the society. It should be like that. If we decide to use the social media the way we do it inclusively. And all should depend on each of us here in this room and each of us speakers.
Those posting on LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter, whatever that is. I've learned alternative text that should be filled in when you put in the pictures. So to what Piotrek was speaking about and Weronika was speaking about, this accessibility, because we're trying to pin in what we are speaking about. Everybody is or will be a person with disabilities. Give a chance to include. I know the perspective, what me, person without disabilities, When joining Wojtek's world, I've become a person, a part of the duo, which is less able than more able, so I gave up my ability. It is not a sacrifice. We are fighting with this, combating against. We should treat people who help people with disabilities as those that sacrifice. So she believes that she sacrificed herself for me, for a different panel. This expansion of accessibility, as far as I know, we are all people that are fully able. We are the men discussing about abortion, kind of. There is nobody from the group we're in. I try to include Wojtek in everything I do, so I kind of feel awkward, but these are the beginnings. This is the beginning. So in a year's time, it will look differently. I'd like us to pinpoint the topic, what this accessibility is, with a specific example. What it means that it is accessible for everybody. It can be accessible for how to organize such an event. People who are listening to us, they should have knowledge on what to take care of that. Where is the text you should pin in? What to look at? Let me share my experience. I'm a great fan of freedom games, and I wouldn't like to vivisect of what was wrong. It's not to my interest, so let me share my experience, my personal experience. I'll face you. I gained some knowledge of the topic. Microsoft decided to organize accessibility interests. We organized hackathon, Hack for Them, 100th anniversary of Stanisław Lem's birthday, and we wanted to do it with other partner. That was digital accessibility, availability. 4 days before an online event did we realize that this is digitally inaccessible. Social media have no alternative text, so people who have Facebook or Instagram cannot read what is on our graphics. Our website has poor accessibility, and Discord channel that hackathon was held on is difficult to decipher. We spent 4 days working with experts to adjust everything, not 100, but we had sign language interpreters who interpreted the sessions. We had captions in all presentations, so lots of work, but still we made it. Without concealing, for our marketing and PR team, public relations team, so the people who involve other people and corporations into different events, it was a wake-up call. We realized that this topic was not addressed. So we came up with the idea with my colleagues. The change agents, as we were called, in the opening speech. So agents of the change, this is what we feel being an international corporation. We wanted to think whether not to declare a charter on participation for accessible events, because it is up to us to exert pressure on organizers. Exert is a bad word, it's an ugly word, but still positive. Requiring something that should be a standard. There is something in our power, it should be nice. Like no women panel. Many people disagree with holding panels without women. In addition to a wake-up call, it might be a painful experience, like any kind of wake-up is painful. Then you have to remember what you have woken up to. There are governmental regulations, Accessibility Plus. And when the program started, there was a conference organized in Copernicus Center. It was accessible. There wouldn't have been any problems without getting onto the stage if you're a wheelchair user. It was safe. There were sign language interpreters, captions live. I'm speaking that the things should be taken into consideration. A few years later, there was another conference organized on the occasion of the complaint platform launching. There was one positive change. We had the first minister with a person with disabilities, a person who is blind, but the conference was inaccessible. It's not the moment of reflection, realizing you need to carry on nurturing that. You need to fight for this ability. Everybody should be doing so. Even in corporations, there are specific marketing forces, contact center divisions, but we have things to do. Like Microsoft Documents available, and the same documents can be made in basic functions. So is it a checklist that I run through? It gives me 100% certainty that I've done it right, or is it a language of difficult tasks? I've got colleagues that there is much to say, much to do, even if you reach the points in the act. If this minimum standard has been met, there'll be things to do, because there is always something to do. Technologies change, the types of events change, but the basic things will be provided for. And we can say that, yes, other human rights can be delivered. I'd add something to what you mentioned. What we experience at the event facility, so that the personnel receives training. There is an elevator or a lift. Little do people know where it is. Where is the key to the toilet that has been locked? The people for disabilities toilet. And this is my private postulate, to train the personnel. One thing I want to say, and then Kuba will be speaking about other important things. Before that, I'm really happy that we are not speaking about awareness. That we need to instruct people. We've got possibilities and we're speaking about technicalities. It's too short. We are all waiting for this to happen, but it's great that we don't have to say about changing humans' attitudes, awareness. It's quite optimistic. No, it hasn't. It depends in which it might have changed. You know, we live in bubbles. I'm a representative of a bubble that has transformed only recently. I'm frank and sincere in what I'm saying. I would take one step further. I'm sorry. So let's take that step. Accessibility is one thing. There'll be a great change if a company analyzes itself, checklist. What am I supposed to do? But it's still difficult, because this is not a revolution. The question is, what do I have from that? What's happening in companies like mine? Google, technological partner, accessibility pays off. This is a financial gain for a corporation. If we want to create innovative solutions, new products, nice products, that clients buy are companies develop for a reason. These are fundamental rights that pay off. So the revolution is to shift the big companies' revolution onto Poland's ground. If you employ a person with a disability, makes your team creative, better communication, critical thinking. 4Ks that Harari was speaking about. Creativity, traits. If we have 5 men and 1 woman, it'll be something nice. And if we add somebody who's got a different perspective, there'll be much better things, much better products. It is not just talking. This is business practice. This will be a revolution. People will understand not only that my product is available, it helps me. Inclusion into society of people with disabilities not only will make it possible to bank on it, but to solve the gigantic problem that we have in Poland. We are short of hands in many business sectors, so creation of posts, something that does not impact a product. You cannot enter a place without being able 100% is, backfiring. I don't want to speak about conference that something may not work. For example, no sign translation. I'm speaking about tactics. I'm quoting my colleagues because I know many who've been dealing with this, or this universal design that is here. All these appliances, this is yet another form of humiliation. People don't know how to use them, and people think it's ticked because we've changed the regulations. We design for 10%. At the end of the day, this is to our interest. To have different attitude to design, it becomes universal. So if we decide that this is universal, we do not contemplate it every time. The same with regards to organization. I know that there are different problems like designing and things. We've got UNO convention. We've got this mechanism, this alternative report from NGOs, but sometimes the bar goes really high. Otherwise, we would have had scraped all votings because they don't make it possible for the blind people to vote. It's too far-reaching. Sometimes the ones that are well organized worse, but they generate something else. As you remember, there was a booklet, not a sheet of paper, because there was a braille overlap that made it possible to vote. But it resulted in PSL because everybody was voting for those from the first page. But when they made this big sheet of paper, there is no overlay for braille because there is no big one to make it possible to vote it this way. But we have to think about other technologies for voting so that they are more accessible. Sometimes we take a step ahead, sometimes we take a step back.
That's what I want to say. The standards should be very, very high, and the role of the organization is to raise the level and make the standards to have penalties following. It's difficult, but not only in Poland. In Poland, we have substantive care. Nobody doubts that children under 10 should not go to orphanages, but they go. and that is something against the law. It's like a negotiation, a contract to what we agree and what we can postpone in time until we find a solution. That's also the inflation of regulations. And I think this is a very important and dynamic discussion on what is the social contract, how to make social contract realistic. I think it's important, and talking to you, I said there are paradoxes. I know a couple of people who work with the intellectually disabled, and I'm trying to think about accessibility, loan, credit, accessibility. These people are not incapacitated, so they meet those people who sell different things, a salesperson, and such person cannot be excluded from loans. So it's paradoxical. So where is the other border? Yes, but the universal design you mentioned is very interesting because according to the discussion on Life on Wheels, I learned about a group of people who use toilets for the disabled despite having no visible disability. Sometimes it was pretty egoistic, but sometimes it could be quite understandable. We may not notice certain problems, and that doesn't mean it does not exist. If all toilets were designed that people with various needs could use them, we wouldn't need to fight for the key. People on wheelchairs need universal toilets, but not only them. There are many people who require that. Well, I'm happy that you mentioned universal design because it was a revolution for me when I understood how our Microsoft technologies are designed, also Teams. It all started from the fact that the design teams are composed in an inclusive way. So the solutions are worked upon by people of different age, sex, problems, and the solution we know from Teams, this blurred background that we law, because it tidies the room very well. It was designed by a girl from Microsoft who is deaf and mute, and she reads and lips, and it was very distorting for her when she saw a clear picture of the background. She couldn't focus on the lips, and she simply said she would design such a filter. The security team loved that, and then everybody who uses it. We have PowerPoint, where I don't know if you use it. It's enough if you put a picture, and you've got beautiful designs how you can make the slide. So one click, perfect slide. And it was not invented for us to make an easy PowerPoint presentation, but because of for people who have problems with precise mouse movements. It's difficult for them to arrange elements very easily, so it was designed for people with disabilities. The fact that we use it today, enjoy it, and just a benefit for my company, but it was developed by an idea from a disabled person. And this universal design is not looking for solutions that would be sort of hurting a person to download a patch to read a website. There are solutions that are used by all of us because we are one society. I want to mention that there is a tool that will recognize the pictures we inserted to generate the alternative description, but you need to verify it still. But the tool is still learning. But one more thing I would like to add. Loan access, it's not a solution to incapacitate a person, but it's to provide the person with the decision-making support mechanism so that the person, he or she, could understand. That's how you need to work. It works with us that we operate with an axe. So we cut off all the human rights. We're incapacitating people who, in most cases, shouldn't be incapacitated. The other thing is we have this educational element. A well-designed website that meets the accessibility criteria would be higher on the web browsers and in Google, in other search engines. Technologies. I met Wojtek by progress of technology on the messenger. I didn't know at all the way he communicated with me. He had any mobility problems because he can use the computer so efficiently using eye tracking mechanism that traces the movement of your eyeball and translates it into the cursor movement. But he has many issues on websites like the National Social Institution website because there is no universal design. But word of respect to Microsoft, because Windows is the only software that can be connected with eye tracker. You cannot do it elsewhere. It only shows how much work ahead of us. But thanks to technology, Wojtek always says if he had been born 10 years earlier, he wouldn't be able to do what he's doing now, not to mention what was possible 20 years ago. If I could add a key word that I have had in my heart and brain, it's not CSR. Although you said this is the domain of NGOs, and it is so, my ambitious personal goal is to lift it up to the business level. It is not that the state's responsibility is to maintain people with disabilities because they are not coping. The social contract obviously exists, and we agree that the state takes up the responsibility from us and cares for us, but it's not that the state is supposed to find and give us work. We should arrange it between ourselves. If entrepreneurs can use whole society, include whole societies in its all operations, we as tech companies can assist. And the pandemic showed how well you can work remotely, of course, with negative effects. But for people with disabilities, it's a great lesson. We can solve a social problem by inclusion of the disabled into normal society. Well, the technologies are then useful, and not everybody is so tech efficient and use such solutions like the PowerPoint, because looking for such options is not so intuitive like for those who are tech freaks. But I'm keep pressing you about concrete examples of accessibility, because the most practical knowledge, and we are not listing everything. I have a colorblind son, but he is in the most popular group. 8% of men suffer from the problem, and once asking him historic questions, I understood he understand information from the maps, and word after word, all the maps are drawn in a way he couldn't see the differences between colors of wars or whatever is depicted, and I wanted to get from him. So I wonder how, as an organizer, or in such a basic thing like a book published by the Minister for Education, do we have a set of rules by which such things should be verified? Because such important place like here, there are such errors. There is no such set of rules. There will never be. Accessibility refers to so many aspects that you cannot standardize everything. Designing of the websites is based on 7 rules. Without going into details, let me show you one example, 2 examples. First of all, the point is that low level of physical effort needs to be guaranteed. It may be some different for different people. You cannot codify that. On one thing, the door should not open with more force than 25 newtons to open. But that means that to make a meeting on the ground floor, not on the second floor, because the elderly would prefer to stay downstairs, and so forth and so forth. So we can try to codify that, but you can't. It would require each time consideration, designer's consideration or organizer's considerations, or map designer, or whether they follow the rule of visible information. If the map is illegible, you can't read the info from that. I was happy to hear about remote learning, because I believe that aids would be better. It's easier to show something on animated picture rather than on the map, but it didn't happen actually. But you will never have that list of rules. You are very professional, but I know many people. And remember that in STOCZNIA we have social innovation project. We have a call now. For the past 3 years, we have collected 300 ideas for support to people who are not independent. Individual people can report, and we see the proposals. As Piotrek said, we follow the path of design thinking. So we speak about particular items that were different ideas. Third eye, information for people who are disabled, special structures of the wheelchair, games for the blind, 3D design, educational set for mentally deranged regarding sexual life. Well, see that we have a whole repository of projects from people for particular situation and design it together with us. We check the prototype. If it works, then we try to communicate to others to make it. That's great. Thank you. We have the sign. Please be coming to the end. Anybody from the audience? Any ideas, thoughts, questions? I could see 2 hands. Well, thank you for all what you said. I have this idea that you speak much that it pays to include, how to make it that the authorities feel it pays to include. I hear that the commission sessions should be broadcast. That's a problem. And how to make it accessible, how to find sign language translators, how to make local authorities, general authorities, administrations to feel it pays to help the disabled. I don't know if the authorities and respecting our human rights always pay, so it's no need to ask. The authorities have to be forced. It's not the goodwill. They have to do it. Accessibility topic, and there is a tension between the people who need such support, and there are regulations that guarantee such support for them, and those who need to adapt their operations for those needs, and sometimes at a huge expense. You speak, it pays for the companies, corporations, but not each company is a corporate. And for many, I'm talking from the perspective of many NGOs who need to adapt. It's sometimes a cost that is huge to adapt a report for the graphics. I had 12,000 zlotys. Well, it's just talking. Sorry, if from the very beginning you do something in an accessible matter, it won't cost you a penny. You just need to, from the correcting errors is expensive. A building that is inaccessible will require lots of money to be adapted to the disabled needs. But to design a building, I'm not talking about the design phase. If we are at the design phase, we can do anything. I'm talking implementation. If you make it to be good, you won't need to spend extra money. Today, there are options, there are tools. They are free of charge. They only require the change of your way of thinking on how you write your document in a text editor. If you didn't write it this way, it has a button, check accessibility, and you will get a list. Hardly anyone knows there is this button, and hardly anyone clicks it. It's not the matter of such money as you've mentioned. I'm not arguing about the tools you can use and how to use the tools. I'm speaking about building tension that exists. If there is an organization that has a room, rents it from the town, and it's not adapted to disabled people, and if they want to do that, they need to pay for whatever. I'm not questioning the need. An organization of this event to make it fully accessible, each streaming with sign language interpreter, with subtitles. It's nothing you could do in an amateur software, something generally accessible. Sign language translator needs to be paid. Extras pay. I'm not talking they shouldn't pay. They should, of course, if the goal is to ensure accessibility. I'm only a bit afraid from the perspective, general perspective, to create the sense that I must do something for those people. Speaking from the perspective of a store, that they feel they need to do something, but they don't understand it's somebody's right. If there is an attempt to codify everything, there will be somebody for whom that would be an obligation difficult to fulfill due to inability to imagine how to fulfill it. And it would be also a cost obligation. If I could, an example how it pays.
Let me give an example. This is a quick one. Żabka, convenience store, accessibility, autonomous. You come in and leave. And there is an avalanche on Facebook that the person with disability could not enter. And there is a huge row and shame for a few days. Well, image-wise, it costs so much that this will be accessible. They will spend extra money to avoid it. It's not a positive example. If it was obligation, well, if it pays off to everybody, well, these are not idiots in these companies. They would be implementing it. Żabka is not a positive example because Żabka didn't do it to make it available, but to cope with hatred, and that's the end. I do understand the difficulty, But we are at a tipping point of a change that you have outlined here, and it goes right direction. I know that Piotrek wants to speak. You've been doing this ever since the beginning. Let me give an example from the Stocznia shipyard. We are operators of Bracia Jabłkowski house, dreamers. But we cannot do anything in a house that is 100 years old because my late friend, Piotr Pawłowski, you need to name it, Kuba, I would come here, but my principle is that I don't come here. But the parties were able to call the problem. There's a big lift, but this is my principle. We are nearing it. I'm not the owner of this, but this is huge money. So we won't be using this space because we cannot meet the standard. When you build it from scratch, the same computer apps. We've been doing lots of that. If somebody writes but social things on open code, and all of a sudden you need to code it, it's painful. It's not a simple button that you do it. We need to recuperate the backlogs from the past. We didn't do it. And I've got the signs that we have exceeded the time limit. So if you want to say just one sentence, to English language interpreter is needed, everybody thought it. English language interpreters' costs are comparable, but it was obvious they would be here, that's it. I've learned a lot from you, so those who are listening to me also thank you.
It's not always easy to recognize. It may look like this, or like this. It may be a burden, but it is a responsibility that we embrace nonetheless. But if it means this for one person and this for someone else, maybe it ultimately means being there for one another. It isn't handed to us, but we know where to find it. And how it feels, how it tastes, and what it sounds like when we finally have it. It means different things to different people, but for many, it means everything. And if we all fight for it, it will eventually bring us together.
Ihre Ausreise.
Now boarding flight 1215.
You may now kiss the bride.
Work is different now. We're commuting less, virtually meeting more. Separating work life and life can feel challenging. It's easy to forget that to thrive at work, we need to take care of ourselves. Microsoft Viva Insights offers new experiences to balance productivity and well-being. Personal insights help you stay at your best and most productive. Add structure to your remote workday by opting for a virtual commute, carving out time to have a productive start in the morning and mindfully disconnect in the evening. Protect time before your calendar fills up for focused work, coaching, and learning. Take regular mental breaks with Headspace, tapping into dedicated moments of mindfulness. Use emotional check-ins to tune into your day-to-day mindset and well-being. Strengthen team bonds with Stay Connected experiences that prompt you to praise collaborators, schedule one-on-ones, and follow up on pending commitments and outstanding tasks. Insights for managers and leaders offer windows into how work happens and the impact on employee well-being. Identify where teams may be isolated and take action to break down silos. Quickly discover opportunities to prevent burnout, promote coaching and development, and boost engagement. You and your team's well-being is important, especially in times of change. Taking care of one another allows you to thrive and your organization to build resilience. Experience how new well-being insights in Viva can help.